When people think of war, they imagine tanks rolling forward, fighter jets screaming through the sky, warships launching missiles, and soldiers advancing under fire. Weapons dominate headlines, defense expos, and political debates. Yet history and modern warfare repeatedly show us that wars are rarely won by weapons alone. They are won by logistics, by the quiet, complex, and often invisible systems that move fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, data, and people to exactly where they are needed, at the precise moment they are needed, and in sufficient quantity to sustain combat operations over time. Before we move forward, please like, subscribe, and share Strategic Vanguard, and be up to date with the latest news and happenings from the world of defense and strategic affairs. Tune into our video channels in Rumble and YouTube. And if you want to hear the audio version, please tune into Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive in Spotify. More than 2 centuries ago, Napoleon famously said that an army marches on its stomach. That statement remains as true today as it was in the age of muskets and cavalry, but the scale and complexity have multiplied many times over. Modern militaries depend on global supply chains, advanced transportation networks, digital command systems, and industrial ecosystems that span continents. Without these, even the most advanced weapons platforms quickly become useless pieces of metal, sitting idle on runways, docks, or battlefields. In modern combat, every military operation is a race between consumption and replenishment. Ammunition is fired, fuel is burned, vehicles break down, sensors degrade, and personnel rotate out due to fatigue and injuries. If the supply system cannot keep pace with this constant drain, offensive momentum collapses. History is filled with examples where technologically superior forces were forced to retreat, stall, or collapse because logistics failed to keep up with operational demands. The Second World War offers some of the clearest demonstrations of logistics shaping outcomes. Germany's blitzkrieg tactics initially overwhelmed much of Europe through speed and concentration of force, but as the war dragged on, Germany's inability to secure sufficient fuel, raw materials, and transport capacity began to strangle its war machine. On the Eastern Front, vast distances, destroyed rail networks, and harsh winters made resupply nearly impossible for extended operations. Tanks without fuel and troops without winter gear were not defeated by enemy weapons alone, but by logistical collapse. On the Allied side, victory depended not only on battlefield bravery, but on enormous industrial and transportation efforts. The United States transformed itself into what was called the arsenal of democracy, producing ships, aircraft, vehicles, and ammunition in quantities that overwhelmed Axis production capacity. But production alone was not enough. Those weapons had to be transported across oceans, through contested seas, and onto foreign shores. The Allied success in securing Atlantic supply routes and building massive port and rail infrastructure after the Normandy landings was as decisive as the fighting itself. Fast forward to the present, and logistics has become even more central to military success. Modern weapons are highly sophisticated, but also extremely maintenance-intensive. A fighter aircraft is not just a jet. It is a flying network of sensors, software, engines, and precision components that require constant inspection, calibration, and spare parts. A modern tank relies on advanced electronics, specialized ammunition, and fuel logistics that are far more demanding than older armored vehicles. Warships operate as floating cities that require steady supplies of fuel, food, spare parts, and technical support. The war in Ukraine has brought logistics back into sharp public focus. Early phases of the conflict revealed how Russian armored columns stalled not only because of Ukrainian resistance, but also due to supply failures. Vehicles ran out of fuel, maintenance systems broke down, and resupply convoys became vulnerable targets. On the other side, Ukraine's ability to sustain long-term resistance has depended heavily on Western logistical support, including ammunition supply chains, training pipelines, repair facilities, and intelligence-sharing infrastructure. Ammunition has emerged as one of the most critical bottlenecks of modern warfare. Artillery shells, air defense interceptors, and missile stocks are consumed at rates far higher than many defense planners anticipated in peacetime. Western countries discovered that their industrial base was not structured for prolonged high-intensity conflict. Rebuilding production capacity takes years, not months, and this industrial lag directly shapes battlefield options. When stockpiles run low, strategy itself becomes constrained. Fuel remains another decisive factor. Mechanized warfare is fundamentally dependent on petroleum. Aircraft, tanks, trucks, and naval vessels all require enormous quantities of fuel. Protecting fuel supply routes, refueling assets at sea, and securing energy infrastructure become strategic priorities. In high-end conflicts, fuel depots and tanker aircraft are among the first targets because disabling them can paralyze entire combat formations without firing a single shot at frontline units. Naval warfare offers one of the clearest illustrations of logistics shaping power projection. A navy is not defined only by how many ships it possesses, but by how far those ships can operate from home ports and for how long. Forward bases, replenishment ships, repair facilities, and port access agreements all determine whether a fleet can sustain operations in distant waters. Aircraft carriers, often seen as symbols of power, are in reality massive logistical consumers that depend on continuous streams of aviation fuel, spare parts, and munitions. In the Indo-Pacific region, logistics is arguably more decisive than sheer numbers of warships or aircraft. The vast distances involved mean that sustaining operations across island chains and open oceans becomes a monumental challenge. This is why both the United States and China invest heavily in port infrastructure, dual-use civilian facilities, and long-range transport capabilities. Control over logistics hubs may matter more than control over individual sea battles. China's military strategy reflects a deep understanding of logistical warfare. The Belt and Road Initiative, often discussed in economic terms, also has clear strategic implications. Ports, railways, and industrial zones built under this framework can potentially support future military logistics. China's development of large merchant fleets, roll-on roll-off ships, and dual-use port facilities enhances its ability to move troops and equipment during crises. Military power is quietly embedded into civilian supply chains. The United States, for its part, is focused on distributed logistics and resilience. Rather than relying solely on large centralized bases that can be targeted by missiles, modern doctrine emphasizes dispersing forces across many smaller locations and using mobile logistics platforms to sustain them. This approach accepts that fixed infrastructure may be vulnerable and seeks to make resupply more flexible and survivable under attack. India's military transformation also reflects growing attention to logistics. For decades, difficult terrain along the northern borders limited the movement of troops and heavy equipment. Today, extensive road construction, tunnel projects, and improved airlift capabilities are reshaping India's operational reach. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands are emerging as critical logistics hubs for maritime operations in the eastern Indian Ocean, supporting surveillance, refueling, and potential forward deployment of naval and air assets. Beyond physical supplies, modern logistics increasingly includes data and digital connectivity. Military operations now depend on satellite networks, secure communications, cloud-based command systems, and cyber infrastructure. Disrupting these systems can be as damaging as destroying fuel depots or ammunition dumps. Cyber attacks on logistics management software, shipping databases, and transportation scheduling systems could paralyze military movement without direct kinetic confrontation. Artificial intelligence is beginning to transform military logistics planning. Predictive maintenance systems can anticipate equipment failures before they occur. Automated inventory management can optimize stockpiles and reduce waste. AI-driven route planning can adapt supply convoys to evolving battlefield conditions. In future conflicts, superiority in logistics algorithms may prove as important as superiority in weapons performance. Another often overlooked dimension is human logistics. Soldiers require training pipelines, medical evacuation systems, mental health support, and rotation schedules to sustain long-term effectiveness. High casualty rates and burnout can degrade combat power even when weapons and ammunition are available. Medical logistics, including field hospitals, evacuation aircraft, and rehabilitation facilities, directly affect morale and force sustainability. Strategic airlift and sealift capabilities form the backbone of global military mobility. Transport aircraft and cargo ships rarely attract public attention, yet without them, expeditionary operations are impossible. The ability to move entire brigades, armored vehicles, and heavy equipment across continents within days or weeks determines whether military alliances can respond rapidly to crises. In many cases, deterrence depends not on what forces exist on paper, but on how fast they can actually arrive. Industrial resilience is also part of logistics. Wartime production requires reliable access to raw materials, skilled labor, energy, and manufacturing facilities. Supply chains that stretch across multiple countries may become vulnerable during geopolitical crises. This is why many nations are re-evaluating defense industrial policy, seeking to localize critical components and diversify suppliers. Economic security and military logistics are becoming inseparable. Sanctions and economic warfare further blur the line between logistics and strategy, restricting access to microchips, precision manufacturing tools, or specialized materials can degrade military capabilities over time. Wars are not fought only on battlefields, but also in factories, shipping lanes, financial systems, and trade regulations. Strategic competition increasingly targets the logistical foundations of military power, rather than frontline units alone. The future battlefield is likely to be characterized by attempts to collapse logistics, rather than destroy combat forces directly. Long-range missiles, drones, cyber attacks, and space-based disruptions will aim to sever supply routes, blind command networks, and isolate forward units. A force cut off from resupply may still possess formidable weapons, but those weapons quickly become irrelevant if they cannot be sustained. This reality forces militaries to rethink concepts of victory. Success may not come from decisive battles alone, but from endurance, resilience, and the ability to regenerate combat power faster than the adversary. The side that can repair, replace, resupply, and reorganize more efficiently gains strategic advantage over time. Attrition is not just about losses on the battlefield, but about which logistic systems can survive prolonged stress. Public perception, however, remains focused on visible weapons platforms. Defense budgets are often debated in terms of fighter jets, submarines, and missile systems, while less glamorous investments in transport aircraft, fuel storage, repair depots, and training infrastructure receive less attention. Yet it is precisely these supporting systems that determine whether high-end platforms can actually function in war. In strategic planning, logistics also shapes political decision-making. Leaders may hesitate to intervene in distant conflicts if logistical feasibility is uncertain. Alliances are strengthened not only by shared values, but by interoperable logistics systems, common standards, and shared supply chains. Military partnerships increasingly focus on joint logistics planning, pre-positioned equipment, and shared maintenance facilities. Even emerging technologies such as hypersonic weapons and autonomous drones do not escape logistical constraints. These systems require specialized production processes, rare materials, and complex maintenance cycles. Stockpiles are limited, and replacement rates may be slow. High-tech warfare can therefore become highly sensitive to supply chain disruptions, making logistics even more critical. Ultimately, the story of war is not only about heroism and firepower, but about planning, coordination, and endurance. The generals who win wars are often those who master logistics as thoroughly as tactics. The quiet efficiency of supply officers, engineers, transport pilots, dock workers, and maintenance crews underpins every successful operation, even though their contributions rarely make headlines. Understanding this reality also helps explain why conflicts often drag on longer than expected. Initial strikes may achieve tactical success, but without the ability to sustain operations, wars become grinding contests of industrial and logistical capacity. Victory belongs to those who can keep moving, keep repairing, and keep supplying when others begin to falter. As military competition intensifies in multiple regions of the world, logistics will increasingly define strategic balance. The future of warfare will not be decided only by who has the fastest jets or the most powerful missiles, but by who can support their forces across vast distances, through contested environments, and over long durations. In that sense, the true backbone of military power remains largely invisible, but its influence is decisive. Wars, in the end, are not won by weapons alone. They are won by the systems that keep those weapons functioning, the networks that sustain soldiers, and the industrial strength that replenishes losses. Logistics is not merely a support function. It is strategy itself, and those who understand this are far better prepared for the realities of modern and future conflict.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard deep dive. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh deep dives every Wednesday and Saturday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Deep Dive. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.